is Miss Checka. I'm here on the bank of the Thames River in London. Actually, more specifically, I'm in Greenwich, England, which is a beautiful, beautiful place to visit. And I'm standing in front of one of the most famous ships of all time. This ship is called the Cutty Sark, and it's a clipper. So I want to tell you three kind of interesting things about the Cutty Sark. One, the name. It is unusual. C-U-T-T-Y-S-A-R-K, 2 words, Cutty Sark. The name comes from an old Scottish term that was referring to like a woman's underdress, like a very thin shift that a woman might wear underneath her regular clothes. And there's a very, very famous and very beloved Scottish poet named Robert Burns, and Robert Burns wrote this poem about it called, Tam O'Shanter. It's about this guy Tam, and Tam drinks a lot. All right, every night he drinks, and one night he leaves this pub kind of drunk on his horse Maggie, and when he is riding Maggie across the plains, there are all of these witches, and the witches are horribly, horribly, horribly ugly, except there's one witch called Nanny, and Nanny was really, really beautiful, and Nanny is wearing a Cutty Sark. So Nanny and the witches chase Tam, and Tam runs away, and he's going towards water because he knows that witches can't go over water. So he gets away, but Nanny, the witch, wearing her Cutty Sark, reaches out and grabs Maggie's tail and held on to it and kept the tail. So Tam in the poem gets away. Well, that's how the poem goes, and for whatever reason, the man who built this ship named it after that poem. So it makes sense that a Scottish owner of a ship would want to do kind of a shout out to Robert Burns, yeah, Robert Burns, Scotland, whatever. It makes less sense why you would name it indirectly after a witch that couldn't go over water, because it's a ship. Also, why after her undergarment? Also mysterious. But the original figurehead of the ship is Nanny herself wearing a Cutty Sark, half naked, and then holding a horse's tail. It's creepy as heck. It's downstairs, I saw it. Anyway, that's story number one. Story number two is what they did with this ship. So if you think about iconic kind of British things, the Queen, castles, whatever, one thing that pops into your head might be tea party, right? It seems like a really, really British thing that you're gonna drink tea. Tea doesn't actually grow in this country. You need like a pretty hot tropical sort of place to grow tea. In England, it's cold and it's rainy. So in order to get tea here to England, where people, loved it, have always loved it for hundreds of years, you would actually need to go all the way to Asia and buy it in China and bring it back. So in order to do that, you would build these clipper ships like this one, and the run from Shanghai in China to London was about 110 days. All right, so that's what the Cutty Sark was originally used for, and it participated in, they were called tea races. So sometimes these clipper ships would race each other and leave from Shanghai in China at the same time and go across the world and see who could get to London first. In one of these races, Cutty Sark raced a ship called the Thermopylae, and they hit a storm, and in the storm, the rudder of the ship came off. It came loose, which is terrifying to even think about, because what a rudder does is that it steers the ship. It moves so that you can steer it. That's without that, the wheel that you see, the captain's wheel, is kind of useless. So it would have made more sense, since they were in the middle of the race, it would have made more sense for safety to have gone to port, maybe stayed for some weeks, had one built. But since these guys were in the middle of the race and they were in a huge hurry, the ship's carpenter actually built a rudder while they were sailing at sea and used it, and they came back to England. So they lost the race, but they won the kind of, come on, that's a pretty awesome thing. Like, their show of seamanship was still, we still remember it today. It's kind of a, what? It's neat. So that's the second story. Third story. So Cutty Sark comes up in another literary way. It comes up in a short story by Joseph Conrad called The Secret Sharer. And I'm going to admit to you right now, I've never read that story, but after reading the backstory, I'm probably going to read it, even though I hate Joseph Conrad with like the passion of 1,000 suns. Like, can't stand him. But for this story, I will read it. So it turns out that in one of the voyages, right? You're at sea for months and months. The first mate was pretty salty. See, I'm using like your young people slang, so I hope you're impressed by that. And also it's a pun, ocean, salty, what? Okay, never mind. The first mate was just kind of a difficult personality, let's call him. And there was a sailor who was also difficult personality. And when you're in an enclosed space like this for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, people just get on each other's nerves. You know, you don't even have to be difficult personalities. So the sailor threatened the first mate with like a big wooden instrument, all right? The other guy took it and hit him on his head so hard. This is the first mate, hit the sailor died, all right? What should have happened is that he should have been arrested. But the captain was friends with the first mate. And when they got into port, the captain helped the first mate escape, all right? So when the voyage continued on, the rest of the sailors were really, really, really mad that one of their own had been killed and that the captain had helped the killer escape, all right? So that's what the short story Secret Sharer is about. Now, the aftermath of what happened is that it became what is now known as the Hell Voyage, all right? So the sailors basically refused to work. Like, you let somebody murder us, you didn't do anything about it, we're gonna refuse to work. So the sailors refused to work, and the captain clapped 4 guys in irons and he arrested them on the ship, and that meant that there was nobody else to do the sailing. So if you look behind me, you see all these ropes and rigging. Like, getting a ship to sail at sea takes a massive, massive, massive amount of manpower, right? You can't just have half your crew locked up. So they had to have everybody doing the work that the arrested guys would normally be doing. So like even the cook was doing all of this work, and it was really, really awful. And when they got closer to port, the captain realized that as soon as they got to port, the sailors that he had arrested were gonna, they were gonna say what had happened, that he had let the murderer escape, that he had arrested, So he just stepped overboard, was never seen or heard from again. Presumably he died at sea. The other guy, the murderer, he changed his name, kind of disguised himself, goes back to London and is recognized. And so he did end up getting arrested. He worked 7 years hard labor. So those are 3 stories for you from the Cutty Sark. That's it. Let's check it out.